Hello, and thanks for stopping by to check out the build. It's going to be a triple elemental Nova Claw that I developed with my friend Ro. I'm Shoeless Rob, and let's get into it. It's going to be a very tanky, very high ward building, very high damage speedcast build. And first we'll go to some video of T4 Julra and see how it performs in action and kind of how it works. So we're going to cast Flame Rush a lot, and it's going to be converted into a Cold Rush that brands our enemies, and that's going to help deal damage. It also casts Static Orb for us, which is converted into a Cold Orb that casts Lightning Aegis for some damage reduction. We'll zip through the level here really quickly and get to the boss fight. We're casting Frost Claw, and that's going to proc our Elemental Novas. Our Elemental Novas deal some damage, they do, but it's not the main purpose of them. The main purpose of them is to cover a large area with a lot of ailments, which is going to help our Mad Alchemist Ladle, and that's going to deal a lot more damage for us. So now we are here at the boss fight, and let's see what happens to poor old Julra. So we're going to be getting in there. And the first thing we're doing is charging up our shield a little bit. We're casting the super shield with Runic Invocation, charging up our shield with some Frost Claws. Let's get out of that Time Warp. And we've got to keep our attacks going so that we keep our shields charged up. And there's our ward generation. More ward generation. We can just sit here and tank her main attacks. No problem. Sit right through them. Easy breezy. Made in the shade. So we're going to continue to do that. Just avoid her main time warp, clock attack, whatever you want to call it. And continue to just tank her other attacks until the end of the fight. And she's a toasty all the way through. So let's get into how it's done and exactly what goes into putting this build together. So we'll zip through the rest of this fight, and it's more of the same. Lots of tanking, lots of spinny void damage, and we'll move on to what we do with our skill points. So the first skill points that we're going to spend are going to be in our passive trees, and we're going to spend 2 points in Scholar and 8 points down in Arcanist. And that's going to give us the 10 points we need to get to the next tier. We're going to skip the second tier and go straight to the third tier where we're going to get Mage Flurry. And Mage Flurry is going to give us some cast speed. That's going to give us a lot of cast speed to do a lot of good stuff with. We need lots of cast speed. And from there, we're going to go to Knowledge of Destruction and spend 5 points there to get our critical strike chance up. And that's also very important to this build. That'll give us 20 points so we can move on to our Sorcerer and our Rune Master trees. So in Rune Master, we want 1 point in Unsealed Mana because we will not be using zero cost skills. So that Unsealed Mana is just to get to the next trees. And then we'll go down to Quintessence of Triumph, and we'll get some points in Quintessence of Triumph. It's important that we get up to about 7 points in Quintessence of Triumph because you'll notice that it goes to more damage instead of increased damage at 7 points. So we want to get that more damage in Quintessence of Triumph down here. So we'll get some points there. We'll add some points to Arcane Focus, because that's going to give us a lot of intelligence and a lot of ward per cast on that Frost Claw, which we're going to be casting at insane speeds. Now, we need to open up our mental catalysis, so we put those points up to 7 down there in our Quintessence of Triumph, and that's going to give us the more damage. And then we go to our mental catalysis and get that up. That's also going to give us some defense. We move on to Inscribed Instruments, which is going to give us a lot of critical strike multiplier to make use of all that crit. We come down to Runeword Cataclysm, which will give us some more damage against low-life enemies, more critical damage against more low-life enemies. That'll be great for that. And we will also get just 1 point in Never Late. We only need that 1 point in Never Late so that we can move on to the next skill. So 1 point there. And then we'll move on to the next skill, which is going to be 3 points in Rune of Dilation. We only need 3 points because you'll see it lasts 1 second per point, and we're going to be casting our Flame Rush or Frost Rush every 3 seconds. So we'll be constantly having that buff of cast speed and attack speed. Now we move on to Ancient Inscriptions for, yet again, you guessed it, more intelligence and some cooldown recovery speed at 8 points, so that's good news. And then we move on to Jagged Veil, which is going to give us more ward for our crits, which we're critting a lot, so that's good. And then we'll come back and backtrack to Sphere of Protection. You can get that last after you get your sorcerer points. We'll go ahead and put it in now, but you would want to get your sorcerer points at some point along this way so that you could get your static orb. We'll get 1 point here in our Runeward Avalanche. Just it's a little extra buff, a little extra cold damage. Never hurt anyone on this build for 1 point. You'll be casting so fast that 20% won't make a difference. And we will get our Sorcerer points, which are going to be 5 points in Arcane Momentum. And that's going to help us with our cast speed. Once again, cast speed everywhere. And then we want to get 5 points down here in Calculated Destruction so that we get our spell critical strike chance per intelligence up. And then we want to move on to Essence of Celerity, which is going to give us move speed and spell damage. So we want 6 points in that. Our last points are finally going to go into our Celestial Doom, and that's going to be against branded enemies, a whole bunch more damage against especially bosses. And we're going to brand our enemies using our Frost from our Flame Rush, which is Frost Rush. So we'll get to that in just a moment when we go over skills. But they'll be branded from that. We don't have to take those other branding passive nodes. No worries on that. So now let's move on to our skills, and we're going to move on to our first skill, which is Frostclaw. And what we're going to want to do on our Frostclaw is immediately get the node Gift of Winter to the right of it, and that's going to lower our mana cost. And then we're going to want to head on over to the left and head straight to Frozen Rain, where we lower the mana cost even more, because we're going to be casting it so fast you'll be out of mana if you don't. Next, we're going to head up to the Nova part of it, and that'll be up kind of at the top, hooked around that purple node up there, and it's called Celestial Conflux. You want 3 points in that so that you're proccing your Nova 42% of the time that you cast Frostclaw. Lastly, we'll head down towards the Zigzag area and get Volley of Glass down at the very bottom right. We'll head through this zigzag pattern, and then we'll end up at Volley of Glass. From there, you fill out the rest of the points as you see them on our tree, so just fill them out as you see them, and you'll end up with some cast speed, some damage, all kinds of good stuff. Next, we're going to move on to our Nova, which is mainly there for ailments, although it will give us a decent amount of damage as well. The first thing that you're going to need to do is go up and get your lowered mana cost. You'll need to put this node right here, Cryomantic Fragility, up to at least 3, maybe 4, depending on how your build is, to get that mana cost down so that you're not wasting your mana. After you do that, you're going to want to go down and get the fire node that increases its size by 250%. And this fire node is going to increase its size a whole bunch, but it has a scary 4-second cooldown on it. No big deal. We're proccing it off of Frostclaw, so it has no cooldown. We're going to proc it 42% of the time off of our Frostclaw, so there is no cooldown, but it makes it huge for us. After that, we want at least 1 point over in our electrical elemental nova. So we want 1 point in lightning nova. And from there, you can pretty much do what you want, although I would recommend getting 3 points or a couple of points in the lightning critical chance and some points into the more damage per ailment over on the frost side, because you'll be casting all of the ailments and you'll be hitting with all the ailments, and that's just more damage, not increased damage, which is always good news. So after this, we're going to move on to our next skill. And our next skill is going to be Runic Invocation. And our Runic Invocation we're going to do through immutable order, meaning that we will never have to worry about powering it up with runes cast in certain orders, but it comes with that scary 12-second cooldown node. That's okay, because the super shield is what we're casting, and that comes with a 13-second duration, just over the cooldown, so no problem. So, and we're also going to take the node that lowers the cooldown of it. So it should lower it down to like 8-9 seconds or so, and that'll mean that you get that burst of ward off of that super shield a little bit more often. We're also going to go off to the left and take our double cast node. The energy buildup from runic energy will happen, and you'll get those 9 charges because we're only casting it every 8-9 seconds. With those 9 charges, you should have an 80 to 90% to cast it twice through copied scrolls. Now, copied scrolls is going to mean that you're going to get double the burst of that shield. And depending on your intelligence, that should be anywhere from 500 to 750 ward, doubled to 1,000 to 1,500 ward right off the bat every 8 to 9 seconds. And then you should be getting 250 to 350 ward a second with the super shield runic invocation of cold, fire, cold. So we'll get that in our bar in a few seconds. Now, you can also go ahead and get the rest of the nodes that are on here in whatever order you like. There's some refunded mana cost. There's some extra buff on your spell damage there off to the right. But let's move on to Flame Rush. Now, in Flame Rush, you're going to want to get right away. You're going to move off to the left on the bottom, and you're going to get casting of Static Orb. And Static Orb is going to give you your Lightning Aegis. You're also going to turn this into a Cold Rush, not a Flame Rush, and that's going to brand the enemies as well with our other cold node, so that way we'll get our branding damage. Now you come up and get your reduced cooldown reduction through the Blazing Flux, and from there you just fill out the rest of the nodes that I have here. You're going to get some extra distance on it. You're going to get Runic's Eclipse to get some taking less damage. You're going to get Celestial Guidance. You get a lot of different things with it. You also get that maxed Frenzy from Fiery Overload is good. All kinds of good stuff. But let's move on to Static Orb. And with Static Orb, we're going to immediately go over to the Insidious Focus to reduce our mana cost and Ball Lightning to reduce our mana cost. We want to get this down as low as possible so it's not eating our mana. Then we want to convert it to cold so that it can be one of our cold skills, getting our cold bonuses. And then we want to get Lightning Aegis, a 4 of 4, so that it's always casting Lightning Aegis. I know we're not doing lightning damage, but we are getting a 25% damage reduction from it. Also, we are getting our cast speed from it with Lightning Aegis, so that is huge. From here, you can do what you like. You can have tendrils, you can have it spin little balls around you, you can have it do more, you can do what you want with it to get some damage out of it. It's a good damage builder. Do what you like. Great, so we've got all these skills. Now what do we do with them? First thing we do is set up our bar with a cold skill, Frostclaw. A fire skill we'll never use, Fireball. And another cold skill, which is going to be our Cold Rush turned from Fire Rush. And that'll set up our Runic Invocation immutable order for Cold, Fire, Cold, which is our Super Shield. Now you can put your 5th skill to be whatever you want. We chose Flame Ward for a little extra ward. You can put whatever you want because your Spark, Static, Orb, and your Elemental Nova are cast off of procs, so they don't need to be there. So we dash for our Aegis and for our Orb. We use Frostclaw to build up some runes. We cast our shield through Runic Invocation after our runes are built up. You want to cast that as soon as possible every level. build up your ward, and you want to keep dashing as often as possible, keep your haste up, your frenzy up, and then basically the bigger they are, the harder they fall. The stronger your enemy is, the more you get to hit them, the more debuffs they get, the more your ladle does damage, the more you get ward. It works great. So we'll move on to our equipment. And this is not best in slot gear. I did that on purpose because you don't need best in slot gear and it's unattainable. So we did pretty good gear. And what you do need for sure is a Mad Alchemist ladle. We were lucky and we happened to get it with increased cast speed. So LP cast speed if you can. And then you will need a Morning Frost boot set. That's non-negotiable. And that funnels dexterity into cold damage. So get that with dexterity or intelligence if you can. Get that with maybe move speed. Get it with what you can. You will need a Twisted Heart of Eukaros, and that is to get your ward up as fast as you can. Leech goes great with that, so you'll need the blessing from Black Sun of Spell Leech, or you'll need to use a Bleeding Heart, which we gave away the Bleeding Heart once we got our blessing of Spell Leech. You will need a Crystal Skull with 6% flat crit on the implicit, and try to get crit strike chance or spell crit strike chance and or cast speed on the front end of it. Helm of Barboot or Barbute is good. Swaddling of the Erased gives us intelligence and dex, and try to get some magey type rolls on that if you can. You may have to go through several sets of gloves before you get a magey type set, so that's rough. The Helm of Barbute or Barboot, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, will give you dex and intelligence to funnel for damage and a lot of armor. That's good to have. And, just LP and add on all of the affixes that we've talked about. Your cast speed, your critical strike chance, your spell critical strike chance, and your intelligence and your dexterity are your damage modifiers. So those will help you out. Now, you also want to get critical strike mitigation on this, reduce damage from critical strike somewhere on maybe your gloves, on your belt, maybe you can roll them on swaddling, maybe you can get them on your belt. And the reason for that is you have on your nodes already a node that gives you 48% reduced damage from critical strikes. So you don't have to get the blessing of critical strike avoidance, and you don't have to waste affix slots on critical strike avoidance. You just get yourself one good reduced damage from critical strikes, and you get armor with it as well, and you get your critical strike damage down to 10 or 15% of what a critical strike should be, and you're good because of all the ward you have. You also, with this build, don't really need as much resistances or endurance as you would think you would need. You shouldn't be dipping into your life, so you don't need endurance at all. And your resistances, as long as they're at 40, 50 and up, you're good because of all that ward that you're going to be generating all of the time. So you should be good with some critical strike mitigation and some decent resistances. And that leaves you free to use the suffixes on your gear for pretty much whatever you want. And the last thing you're going to need is going to be some idols. And that's going to be your idols of cast speed when having Lightning Aegis. You want 3 or ideally 4 of those to be rolled, and that's going to give you a lot of cast speed because you're always going to have Lightning Aegis, and that gives you a ton of cast speed. So you can see when we get Frenzy from our Flame Rush, when we get all of our buffs going, we pull up our character sheet and our crit strike chance and everything, our cast speed just goes through the roof. And that doesn't even count the crit strike chance that you get from Frostclaw itself, so you should be critting pretty much all the time. Pew pew pew, Frostclaws everywhere. So, Now we've got lastly our armor. You can fill in your idle slots, your remaining idle slots with whatever you like. You can fill up resistances or whatever you like. Lastly, we got really lucky with some prism wraps with LP. Icing on the cake, you can fill in with some regular armor, maybe a base that has ward gained per mana used. Whatever you like, whatever you're missing, you can put on that base. Use the affixes that we've talked about, cast speed, criticals, all that good stuff. And that's pretty much it for the build. We'll do a little gameplay here while we wrap it up. Thank you for coming, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at Discord, on the official Discord. I'm in voice chat a lot, or you can reach out to me at Shoeless Rob on Discord, and you'll find the link to the build planner here in the YouTube description, as well as on lastepochtools.com. Big shout out to those guys for all of the hard work they do there. And thank you guys for coming. Hopefully you enjoy the build.